stop shit. They say, okay, we'll move to another environment then. That's not going to be this harsh towards us.
It's not as easy as that, because business normally runs after two things. They run and they go in environments where there is a market, and they go to an environment where they've got an ability and a potential to make profit. So if there is a market and if there is a potential to make profit, of course the policies can be absolutely, crazy as it were.
Hayi thama ngiyalaza umuntu uthanda ukukhuluma kakhulu.
South Africa to implement policies
Umuntu efanele nokhuluma naye umqondisise umlalele kahle ukuze nizwane mama. Baphuma endleleni ayazazwa.
Kumele better ukwenza izinto ala.
Ya njengoba bekasho athi ngiyahamba no yekelana. Ngizosala nenza indosi. So manje kufanele nayenziwa abuye eze abone ukuthi okay it's fine nayo right. Otherwise abathatha chances.
I say kid train. Abantu bathengisa ama-ticket baphelele umsebenzi.
Awuphelile. Mara bathi ngapha uJobe babhizi bahlanganisa. You know ukuthi le nto le i-vandalize yenziwe since kungenile ikukhu bavumbuka nalabantu baphumela bayela even though le lona la station bakhiphela amasekelo wakha ngayo. They crying now. Bafuna i-train again. Where they gonna get this?
Futhi siyasimoshela thina esabantu.
Yeah, siyasimoshela self. Mangabe ukuthi kuthiwe i-strike. Sukela isikole. Cheese. Izophela lo. I-strike yanamhlanje. Sasa abantwana kumele baye esikoleni. What's gonna happen? There's no school. Kula amaglasi. Machisi. Siyaqala futhi sikhala ngogava. Anothola umuntu onganasineke. Anothola umuntu onganasineke.
Yeah.
When retirement is the start of a new beginning. But how prepared are you for the next adventure? Next Wednesday from 9 a.m. Join 702 in conversation with Old Mutual Corporate. Find out how to
Manje utheni na nibuya kuphi ekhaya?
Join me 702 conversation with Old Mutual Corporate next Wednesday.
Umalanga elona eDelmas. Adela emakhaya. Plaza.
Now la akusiku Delmas.
Wantuthu.
Usho le Delmas yase ilofu noma
11 o'clock. Tafiso in Joburg says, hello Clement,
No.
words of wisdom indeed.
I want to mold up a stocks. I'm not one of stocks.
Thank you very much. Another person
Yeah.
soon after you said,
Let's say
Lapha eGravelini lapha.
yeah, let's say ngithi Pretoria Road.
she's indeed an inspiration. That's Tshepo.
Ngibona ubuyisi.
Famele. And then,
Igrabo rugo ohamba ngayo wayijump ohamba ngayo straight.
Yeah, ushuthi the time ngisangena eSandra. Besihamba ngayo city.
Nobamba leso spontiri. or benisijumpa. Angisho lapha ka-Stokes
Yeah.
kunegrabule ehlayo.
Yeah,
Mayifika phambili kuneskontiri.
Yeah, bese
Ningena iskontiri.
angisakhumbuli ukuthi bekunani.
Iskontiri.
Ngathi iskonti but besihamba ngayo.
There's another grabura again
Yeah.
ejumpayo.
Yini eqhubekayo?
Yeah, iyaqhubeka.
Yeah.
Athi nanifika lapha kuphela igrabula half leya ka-Stokes.
Yeah.
Levela ka-Stokes. Ningena iskontiri. There's a 4-way stop there.
Okay.
Then in the 4-way stop, iskontiri lesi siphinde sikubisele ema-19.
Yeah.
Ne-Pretoria Road, ne-Springs Road. So lapha kune-gravel road again ejumpayo. Mawujampa ngayo le gravel
Yeah.
uhamba ngayo phambili iyabhenda, bayibhenda yehla thina besilapha. And nobheka lamaplaza lawo,
Yeah.
there was born.
Yo, manje awunaplazi nyana.
Iplaza khona
Sofuye inkukhu ney'nkomo.
iplazi ithi likhona,
Eh.
but inkinga manje the family tree.
Ubani ohlala khona?
Usaliwe yandawo leya indawo yabomkhulu, athi indawo yabomkhulu yabhaliswa ubaba lethatha kuthiwa abelungu baxotsha abantu endaweni zabo. So iphasile siwinile, but imizi kaMthemunye iyi-6 houses. So kuleyo 6 houses kunaboclever players.
Yeah.
So the other people bafuna ukufuya, and then i-government should think mina ngithi the time siwin bakhiphe imali yokuqala. Okay, it was not so much isiyarojwa, it's 2 yomhlaba, but you want no sangasasayini ngoba mina I was supposed to take the signature. Then nangibeka isignature means ukuthi ngivulele imali ngoba iphepha lafikela lapha. So bangistopha ifamily. So manje kuliwa le ndaba yayo leya ndawo ukuthi why imali encane.
Ungakanani umhlaba la?
Kwazi bani ngoba kwaye abantu abadala bayo. So ke lento ikhulumayo ukhuluma ngento vele nami engangiyifuna because ngangisebenza ngemfundo.
Yeah.
Mina ngangisebenza ngemfundo. Ubona inkukhu lezi zamacala.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ngabe ungitshele ngenkukhu eqanda.
Yeah.
Sebenza ngayo 8 years.
Yeah.
Eqanda. From usaqala ungena inkukhu eqanda mayingene okweni ingena ingaka. So siziluse zithathe 3 to 4 weeks. Ziqale zibekele mazithi boma, let's say zithi 4 weeks. Yaqala ubekela maziqala ukubekela mazithi 1 week batshintsha ukudla.
Yeah.
Batshintsha ukudla ke kunokudla ezidlako uma zisafika. Then maziqala ukubekela batshintsha ukudla. Basafaka ukudla bafaka ukudla ngathi kufeyini. Ngathi kufeyini kuyakudla kuyakhathi nje. Yabafaka wona. And then drop ama-drinkers. Kunalento le ama-drinkers lesiphuza. Kukho umshini phela ayiphuza nje phansi. Phuza ama-drinkers wakhona nje kuningi. So siyawadropa nama-drinkers. Then i-sodas khona lento yabona amaplanka bawafayile.
Exactly.
Yakunalento ephumayo le i-sodas. Sithele i-sodas emanesti kunamanesti siyawadropa. siyadrobha
We have the right people.
then sifake isoda senje nala phansi
Go down.
Yeah.
and then kusuka lapho
Authority asking them to provide a list of
awuzobukela ecadeni nina maseyila ayangewela amaseyila mangabe kuyashisa like njengamanje uyawadrobha half awavuli wonke
Yeah.
ya engisayini njengoba kuso
Yeah.
awavuli wonke uwadrobha half mhlambe lethe azofika la layidini akushisa wadrobha down and then
Asithengi banana nyama.
For instance, to buy coal that has a high ash content, and then some of it is not coal, it is stoves. This coal that I'm talking about, how do you think that coal,
Lekai.
how do you think that deforestation is going to help with that,
Banana ke bokae?
I don't even know.
Ke kopa tse 2.
and then
You definitely need,
fanele ube
it's
nemforo
not going to be a silver bullet that is actually going to fix Eskom. Yes, you need steady hands, people who know enough about power stations to be able to assist us, but
Na kopa le di keep.
the right people in the jobs will
fanele ube
One.
because there's still a lot of corruption in the
Okay, uyafuna na.
yeah. People
Mazi.
don't want to see Eskom.
Ke a leboga.
We need the board to be
fanele ube nemforogo ispekharafu
Thank you.
fanele ube nemforogo ispekharafu and then
And I think
utamane ukuphendula leso dasi laphansi
Yeah.
kuba lo
so I think we definitely need to address it.
inkukhu engangisebenza ngazo mina ngangikhipha amaqanda 7,000 each
Yes. Izulu liyaphezulu lapha.
no sebenza sithu uyindlela eneyanga
Lameli walandele nale. Ngoko nje nisebenzisa ama-nest ne?
nama-nest kuya ngawo ukuthi uqala phambili or uqala emuva kuya ngawo
Yeah.
but ziyabekela ekuseni ekuseni ziyabekela kudlala lenkukhu
Cannot take 3 years. I said, well, it's out of my hands. I said, you are responsible. If it's out of your hands,
hayi ekuseni akudlali nawo ngafuna ukukhala
employment come again.
Mara kusho ukuthi bezibiyela ebusuku.
azibekela ebusuku
Yeah.
Last is the
Okay.
So investors want to
inkukhu yomshini ibekela iqanda eliyi-1
according to what we have at the board. When is load shedding going to
zonke ley'nkukhu lezibekela iqanda eliyi-1
Yeah.
each and every day but into ekhona zidinga amanzi nokudla
Yeah.
wakuncisha amanzi
24 hours.
akunaqanda ozakho
Yeah.
and then ama-light wakhona asebenza ngelona ngesense thina ngabo-5 siyashayisa siyahamba ama-4 siyaphuma emahokweni azozigcimela ama-light ekuseni before uzolayita ama-light kucala kustate lo mshini wami usokudla ukugcwalisa ugcwalisa ukudla uqeda ugcwalisa ukudla bese ama-light ayakhanya siphuza amanzi siyadla ngabo-6 sigibele emanestini
Yeah.
ziyabekela awuthola ngathi canda kukufa
Yeah, futhi yabona ngale kolihlalo emuva ubonile bayenza indawo la khona inkukhu yeah bengile izolo somewhere izolo or before izolo actually try uzamile lo muntu yabona
but zizogula la.
Hashtag FTHB, hashtag TP,
Why?
hashtag private property.
Kunabantu kakhulu.
What does this all mean? Are you a first-time
Hayi inkukhu
property show is designed to
zifune i-environment open.
and awesome giveaways.
Open. Kunjengale ndawo lengitshela ngayo ukuthi seyikwela isigaba. Ngoba inkukhu ozifuyo kufanele ube nediphu lapho khona amabhutsi udiphe i-overall nawe ngaphandle mangiphuma la ngiyikhipha le benginganayo lapha ehhokweni faka engizohamba ngayo ngaphandle mangibuya ngiyageza ngiceda ugeza faka leya overall
Biosecurity.
if you follow that thing sizokulasta
From the IEBC perspective, have we been able to create supporting
inkukhu ngisebenze ngazo lecanda ngilithi
50,000 permanent
ihlanganelo la
Sekubone kakhulu.
ngazi ngigcine nini ukuthi icanda
business partners. These are businesses
Kusho bokuphila ngalo.
employing people like
Kakhulu.
no icanda phela beliphukela la phela bengifaka isandla so ngiphume na 6 or 5 wathele kule lona yabona le trailer le
Yeah.
trailer besiphatha 30 ngwapaka so 12 ngwaguga phume na and enye into ziyawadla lama trailer kumele usigade thola la macele enziwadlula otherwise ungabona wile necala le
Yeah.
ufake ireport lapha bakutshela ukuthi iminimum yama-tray emele uwaphathe 6 wakhipha so thina masisodwa i-6 izo soqeda thatha 12 ngene nawo wapake
Yeah.
application process for grade 1 and grade 8 online admissions earlier today. He says the new changes will allow a total of at least 120,000 applications to be completed in just an hour.
But I have
In the
more
past,
than
disruptions had been reported due to system failures. The
Like
NEC says
like
the
Jehovah
online
said that
platform
in my
has
class.
also been upgraded to
Uba-
ensure
Uba
enough
Dom.
protection from hackers.
We will urge parents, please be ready.
Ubatom because
Ensure that
awazi ukuthi le
can
nto
be able to
inemali
make an application. There must be no
Yeah.
excuse that the system
Abantu
failed or
aba-
the system crashed or I could not
swapaka
access the
swapake
system.
ngabo
We've
losithathu
improved that part.
uzitrack
Also the hackers,
Wathathu,
we know,
wasele i-HR.
normally when we
HR.
start this process,
wafika le
it creates excitement
Abanye
in the world of
bayathengisa, abanye
hackers.
bafaka imishini
They want to know who's the best one to hack our system. We are ready for them.
Applications for next year's online admission system will open tomorrow and will close at midnight of
ikhampani yethu
August this year.
beyingalose because
A former senior government official accused of receiving a 7 million rand bribe from controversial businessman Edwin Sodi is expected to make a first appearance at the Bloemfontein Magistrate Court today. 56-year-old Margaret Ann matter is in connection with the 255 million rand asbestos tender that was issued by the Free State government in 2014. Osikona Duma reports.
Between 2014 and 2017, the Free State government, under the leadership of former Premier Ace Makashule, irregularly awarded a tender to Edwin Sodi's company, Blackhead Consulting, for the removal of asbestos roofs. Fox spokesperson Christopher Single claims Margaret N. Gidris participated in the alleged corruption.
The suspect, who was the acting HOD of the Department of Human Services in Gauteng, also authorized the same service provider irregularly in Gauteng. He then fraudulently received an amount of more than 7 million from the service provider.
12 other accused, including Makashule Sodi and former Mangaung Mayor Olin Lameli, have already been charged and appeared in court on the matter. They are expected back in court on the 23rd of September. Kosikon to Eyewitness News.
The late ANC Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte will be remembered at a memorial service in Johannesburg this afternoon. Duarte died in the early hours of Sunday morning following an 8-month battle with cancer. She was buried on the same day in line with Muslim rites. Nokukhanya Mdambo has more.
The ANC's national and provincial leaders, as well as the party's rank and file, will spend the day celebrating the life and times of stalwart Jesse Duarte at the Johannesburg City Hall. The memorial forms part of a week-long period of mourning declared by the governing party. At the time of her passing, Duarte was the acting Secretary-General of the ANC. She had been part of the Secretariat since 2012 at the party's Mangaung conference. Duarte was re-elected at the Nasrec conference in 2017. She took ill in November last year, never returning to office. In the days since her passing, the 68-year-old has been described as an anchor and a straight shooter. The woman, fondly known as DSG, has also been hailed for her efforts to unify the deeply divided party, sparking some fears that her death will plunge the party into deeper disarray. But the ANC leaders have vowed to carry her legacy forward. Nokukhanya Mdambo, Eyewitness News.
A labor law expert says the COVID-19 pandemic has taught many companies many tough lessons. While others were forced to either shut down or retrench workers, some had to weather the storm during life under the new normal. Law expert Heineke Brandt believes now is the time for big business to learn from what has transpired over the past 2 years. Ronald Masinda reports.
Many companies were forced to prioritize people's lives while ensuring that livelihoods were not affected. Some big businesses took drastic measures by forcing workers to vaccinate. And while this remains a contentious issue, the director of Mthatliso Stanfield Incorporated, Heineke Brandt, believes there are better ways for companies to convince employees to take the jab.
Most employers I speak to came to the conclusion that it's better to educate, train, discuss with employees rather than try and force them into the mandatory vaccination policy.
Brandt also says that while the infection rates are low, now is the time for employers to create awareness so that companies don't face similar challenges in the future. From Masila Eyewitness News, Cape Town.
And in Sri Lanka, the country's 6-time Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has been of the South Asian nation. The 73-year-old was overwhelmingly elected as head of state in a parliamentary vote yesterday.
We can
over a crisis-hit government. He's struggling with its worst economic crisis, which has seen major shortages of supplies of food, fuel, and other basic necessities. Gold is trading at $1,692 per ounce.
ukuze ugain funeka uzithole zisesezincane.
Oh yeah,
wona masikule boxanyana uzikhulise. Inkukhu yomshini yonke uyithenga intshwele, even nayo le yama pieces intshwele. Inkukhu yomshini azitshintshwa yini uthi bekele ukudla.
yeah.
Ngophengela ukudla lokhu ukuthi kumele sibekele kuyazitshintsha ibhodi icile for iqanda. Ngofuna ukwenza inkukhu ukuthi uzithengisele Las Vegas lapha mhlambe abolamthuthu ubaye lokudla lokho ukuthi kuthoba then izitshetshe zikhulu masinya.
On 702.
Let's walk the talk on 92.7 and 106 FM.
Just cool right man is all about
after 11 o'clock.
PCN hype.
Welcome to the final hour of the Jimmy Jonathan Show. Incredible women.
So I like to
Thank you
oh khona la ubone khona lo muntu uye waya wayobheka.
Yeah, hayi kuncane kuhle.
Uyenze istructure sakho senza kanjani?
Never give up on your dream. I'm so glad that a lot of you will
like a cage system.
That conversation with
yeah.
So it's 11 minutes now.
You with Clemens Maniatella.
What an honor.
You should have cage
hosting Professor Patrick
with your
in studio this morning. He one of the leading public speakers we have. He has the heart for the continent of Africa. When he speaks, he inspires. And that's certainly how I feel.
Yeah, but electricity lapha.
And I've watched many.
Solar.
And I walk away not only
Yeah,
understanding
for charge
the
your phone,
challenges we face as a
some lights.
continent, but I walk away with the hope for a better Africa.
Ukuze ugovernment akufine. Akufine.
He's been brought here in the country by
Yobusho plus. If ube go right. Bekangafunda because lapha indawo vele ye-business. Plus.
Welcome back to South Africa. Welcome back home. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much.
So no builder vele. Nabantu oyilenza by the way mina ngilazi ngakhona.
Yeah.
Ufuna amakholo.
About the concept of a devoted across this continent. You've seen,
Kumele liphakame kumele kushaya umoya kahle kahle.
how devoted citizens of this continent, how invested in its success.
Gijima nje
The truth be told, the
and
evidence
mase
demonstrates
zilona zidombe inkukhu angithi mazicala zikhula
it is half-hearted
zifuna ukubekela fanele ekuseni sifike ungena ekuseni kumele usheshe
we do not.
ngoba zenzane zifuthelana ekhoneni
And when one talks about
and mazibuthelana ekhoneni
season, one talks about a
wazijwayeza ukuziyela zoyenzani zokugcina zibekelela khona lapha ngeke zisaya lapha manje sibukisini so kumele uzisuse uzisuse zingajwayeli ukuhlala lapha uzisuse waziyeka mase zicala ukubekela zibekela lapha everyday kuseni namaqanda ukuthi ziwabekele phansi ayangcola
occupy positions of leadership to be accountable, and citizens are few and far between. Yet, even as I say so, there is, as I walk across the continent of Africa, an emerging army of young men and women who are now clear in their minds that this continent can only be built by her sons and daughters. And that is what gives me hope and joy at once.
How devoted are our leaders? Over the last few decades, the continent has been celebrating its independence from colonization. Liberation movements have always had plans to build a continent that they've always dreamt of. But years later, we're talking about an Africa that is still far behind in terms of economic growth, education, just infrastructure development. Africans are still living in dire conditions, and you could argue that the problem is poor governance, lack of accountability, corruption. But isn't the root of all of these challenges poor leadership?
Without doubt, we have men and women in positions of leadership who largely do not care about the continent. You and me must learn from history and learn from the forefathers and the founders of our post-colonial nations. When you listen to them, the conviction, the dedication, the clarity with which they could see our problem, the diagnosis that they made about what our problems were. We were to fight poverty. We were to fight disease. We were to fight ignorance. We were to use our resources, both natural and human, for purposes of catapulting the continent from the muck and mire of desperation to the hard ground of hope. But every other election cycle, we see men and women who, upon occupying positions of authority, suddenly suffer from amnesia. And what they do is to use those positions for primitive accumulation of resources. They tell us they are going to build schools, but they have no faith in those schools. Their children will never go to those schools. They tell us they are building a hostels, and they themselves and their families will never do that. They steal money and they invest that money outside of the continent. The curse of Africa is the quality of the men and women who occupy political spaces. That is not to say that there are not a few positive examples. They are across the continent, but on a scale of 1 to 10, only 2 fit the bill.
So why are we not rising up as Africans against these politicians, even when we see we are being manipulated and we're being used as pawns?
You know, sometimes I ask myself, why are we so docile? And when one rises or a few rise, the majority are quick to condemn them. They want to disrupt what they call peace. And the politicians know this. They know that they have succeeded in hypnotizing us. They hypnotize us through ethnicity. They say, he's doing the wrong things or she's doing the wrong things, but he's from my ethnic group. Therefore, let me not muddy the waters. We are too docile. We don't raise the questions. We still wrongly believe that leaders are given to us by God. Wrong. God does not give people, men and women, whose only claim to fame is to destroy their countries. Our docility is our undoing. But yet, history demonstrates that Africans were not always docile. When the colonialists were here, we rose up, at least our forefathers did. In this country, in South Africa, I remember so very vividly how leaders were rising from those early days. If it was not Albert Lutuli, it was Pixley Kaishaka Seme. If it was not Kaishaka, it was Sobukwe. If it was not Sobukwe, it was Mandela. If it was not Mandela, it was O.R. Tambo. If it was not O.R. Tambo, it was Albertina Sisulu or Madikezela, Mandela, and even later we saw people rising. Where is that spirit? I choose to name those who are long gone because they are safer, they'll commit no other mistakes. But those who are alive are still there. Where is the spirit that gave birth to the Sharpeville massacre? Where is the spirit that gave birth to Soweto? Where is that spirit?
What do you think changed? The politicians we have are so obsessed with power. It's by hook or crook. And I wonder how we can make power less attractive. You've got blue lights, that can get into your head. Hence, many leaders hang on to those positions and they even kill for the position. So how do we make it less attractive and more about what you do in the interest of people and not so much what you benefit when you get into those positions?
If there is a set of individuals who give meaning to the phrase power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, absolutely, it is the African politician.
And you must run for yourself. Let's say we open that thing. Sithenge inkukhu minimum mele kube 500 iwoko mali lincane.
Certainly you don't
not ukuthi uvule lapho.
Certainly you have allowed
to siqala nge-500. It means makuyi 500
become a demigod. And when you treat people as gods for so long, they begin to believe that they are gods. They have a sense of entitlement. How do we make it less attractive? We must now ask ourselves what we can do to reduce the perks that they had. And we can learn from other civilizations. In countries such as Cuba, you don't get paid. There are absurd amounts of money that people get paid. You don't cease to obey the law simply because you are a politician, a president, or a cabinet minister. You continue to do what other citizens do.
You must start for yourself. Start sakho ukukhulisa le nkukhu zibekele aphume lamaqanda mele akhishwe kuwe zize ziretire ukubekela. And then the second term khani uzoqasha
uzibonele ngokwakho
ukuthi how to run, otherwise uzoba senkingeni.
Ungalazi business lakho
uzoba senkingeni because bazohweba amaqanda bakutshela into ezingazwakali and umele uaccept. So manje mawuqale wena wazenzela uyazi ukuthi mazi 500 makuthiwa namhlanje sikhiphe 409 10 ayibekelanga. what was happened, bekwenze njani. Either amanzi or beziyagula or something. So lo muntu lo mele akutshele ireason ezwakalayo.
The sooner we wake up, the safer we are. And I've seen it in Africa. When people have risen, I saw
Fana
it
neteksi,
in
takes more
Sudan.
than
When people rose
fanele
and
uqale irayi ubonga ukuthi Monday
from office and
ikhipha
it's in jail,
kanjani.
as I said.
NgoLwesibili
I saw it, and we are still
Saturday,
seeing in
Sunday.
Sri Lanka when the people
they say
rose
that.
up and the president
So kayinike umjele checking.
This is our duty to conquer fear and to wear the garbs of responsible courage. And that is why we talk about the devoted citizen who will not sit because he or she knows that if he or
And
she
you must
sits without
fanele
doing
uthole
anything,
abantu
then
abazulu.
this generation and generations yet to be born will suffer and
Mama.
suffer immensely.
And I hope that message gets to all of our hearts. I want us to talk about African unity.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if we are still united as the continent of Africa. You've said before that for us to understand the present, we have to understand the past, because that gives us a glimpse into what the future holds. And I would like us to take a few steps to the past.
And then bese ufuna mhlamba abantu
assembled in Berlin in
abazowathenga
1800,
while ubusy
1884,
uqala ustart
1885, they agreed
uma
to
start
divide
ukwenza
Africa
imarketing zingakabekeli ngoba
spheres of
bazokuqala
influence for purposes of exploitation.
Uthimele?
Have we managed
wenza imarketing
the continent to
Malethi?
imarketing
Oh, yeah.
wenza imarketing ngoba
No, you know when
every day ziyabekela phela mazi 500 ungaba nenhlanhla kushoda amaqanda ayi3 wonke lawo maqanda kumele athengiswe yabona kumele ube ne-cool place uyabona ukuthi you can ungadila ne-pick and pay maningi ngamaqanda
it was as if hunters had gathered and said, let us each take our hunting ground. You hunt in you the French hunt in West Africa, you the British hunt in southern and eastern Africa, you the Portuguese hunt in southern and eastern Africa, in Mozambique and Angola, you the Belgians hunt in the heart of Africa, you the Italians hunt in the northern part of Africa, you the Dutch hunt in the southern part of Africa. That is how they divide. You the Spaniards hunt in the
Saturday
Africa of Africa.
start imoto so sesizwa kuthiwa bojayiva
They came and told us our spirit and our God and our orientation to
abantu
God
abenza
was
ibhizinisi
wrong.
banamalanga
They told us that our language was wrong. They told us that our culture was primitive, and they told us the only cultural thing we have our traditional dances. They lowered our self-esteem.
lenyanga le
And
sibhadalele
then
abasebenzi
they gave us
ibhajethi
languages so that today when we talk we say we
ngoba
are
wawuthi ufuna ukuya
Anglophone.
eCape Town no you can go
We say we
uzosala
are
ngibhizi
Lusophone because
nebhizinisi
we speak Portuguese. We say we are
next
Francophone.
time mhlambe
And even
after
Arabo.
3 months 4 months
Then
hayi
we
ndoda
fought
nawe
for
sekuyitheni
our
yakho you
independence
can
and
go
gained independence.
yabo
Then
kanjalo
they
ibhizinisi
allowed
iba
us, and we
right
thought
but makuzolo
we had
kuthiwa
our
hayi le
national
nyanga le
anthem,
i-right
and
imali
killed them ever since.
sesizwakala kuthiwa hayi
Our national
sesigijima
motto
lesi
and our
dla
national
kamnandi sport
vision
FM
and our national flowers and our national animals and coat of arms. But yet, the infrastructure for the neo-colonial project was also being abandoned, and they introduced visas so that when I want to come to South Africa, I need a visa. When you want to come to Kenya, you need a visa. They gave us our currencies. You have your rand, we have our shilling, they have their franc, they have their metical, they have their kwanza, their cedi and naira. They divided us. And as I speak today, even as I remember the efforts in 1963 by the founding fathers and mothers to unite us so that we can have one currency, have one army, have one agenda, have one foreign policy, they were there lurking in the shadows and persuading us that this unity was not in our best interest. So today, African countries are much more wedded to the Commonwealth because they were colonized by the British, or the former French colonies, or the former British colonies, or the former Portuguese colonies, and our African Union, which was the new name we adopted after the Organization of African Unity, is weak, manipulated, controlled largely from outside, financed by the French, financed by the Chinese. We are disunited, we are weak, we are suspicious of one another. We don't see ourselves as one body, and our weakness is a multi-million-dollar industry for other civilizations.
Because they benefit when we are weak. At what point are we going to be united?
The beauty is that there is now a group of men and women who are beginning to recognize that the antidote to our disunity is unity, and the antidote to our multiple problems, be they economic and political, is unity. It is slow and painful and sometimes frustrating, but as I walk through the continent of Africa, I see that groundswell, I see the